60s. She was in Sofia at a conference together with me, and I said to her, you must really recognize all the arguments, all the counter-arguments, the whole situation here from your youth, from the days when you were active in Sweden. She said, yes, of course, it's the same arguments, same language used, but the big difference, she said, between you and us back then is that you know the answer. You have somebody to look at. You know where you're going at. You know it's possible. You know that you can have marriage. You know that you can have adoption rights. You know this because your neighbor has it. When we started, there was nobody out there. We were an unknown territory, and nobody believed that it would be possible, really, except for the few crazy people who started. And this is the enormous difference and our enormous advantage. And also the advantage that it's not just us in Latvia, it's Estonia, it's Lithuania, it's Poland, it's a number of other countries in Europe, more or less sitting in the same boat. We know each other, we have started to cooperate with each other, and I think this is also something we need to develop and continue doing, so we can have this tipping point effect spreading in not just one country, but in several. So that, in a longer term perspective, I really, if you ask me, what Latvia will look like in 15 years, I really think we will have reached this kind of shift. I truly believe we will have some sort of partnership legislation in place. I truly believe that some of our celebrity friends will have come out. There will be at least one or two members of parliament. There will be, we already have an athlete, by the way, which not even Sweden has, so that's a big achievement. But other kinds of celebrities within culture and media and so forth. And these people have tremendous effect. I remember this from Sweden when I grew up. I mean, the only other lesbian I knew was Karin Boye. She was a poet who committed suicide in 1944 because she was a lesbian. So, there were no role models for me. In 1995, Sweden adopted the partnership law. The same year, several celebrities got married, and this really triggered enormous change in Sweden. So this is perhaps then the other tool we need, apart from strengthening our own communities, to really keep on lobbying and working on the legal side of it, that we need a partnership law, because that will really not just help people to live their lives, but also trigger larger change.
Thank you very much.
We try to work on education issues. It's much more complicated than in Sweden. We cannot enter to schools, so that's why we work on different strategy. In 2004, we start a workshop for teachers and educators, because we think that first we should educate teachers, invite them to our organization or to other centers, and to show, to teach them. And then if they will see that the LGBT homophobia is it's very important to talk about these issues in schools, they will invite us to make classes, and it works. So that's why it's been 6 years when we are educating teachers and educators and psychologists. But I want to give you an example how the conscience and knowledge of Polish teacher and educator is small in Poland. When we start our workshops, the teacher, they don't know how to talk about questions of homosexuality. They very often say, yes, in our class there is this problematic child, and then after, for example, 2 days workshops, they can say, yes, my pupil, he's gay or she's lesbian, and they are asking us what we can do, how we can help to this person if he has any problem or she has any problem. We're trying also to build networks. So that's why we made researches about bullying in schools and with other European organizations, because we see that bullying is very also important issue, because it's not only about LGBT being gay or lesbian, but about any difference, and the children are very intolerant and we discovered, well, it's nothing new, but the swear which children use is "you're gay, you're lesbian." So it's not only in Poland but in also other countries. I would like to also mention about our good practice, because we started to collaborate with trade unions and teacher trade union, and this is something special in the Eastern Europe, because we are the only organization in the region, that the Polish teacher trade union is the only trade union which is interested in fighting homophobia and to talk about these issues. So they even established some person in every Polish region who is responsible for discrimination and inclusive issues. Well, I think later we will come up with questions.
Thank you. Talk for 5 minutes each about their vision and practice of inclusive human rights education. And I think in the process we will come to see how each of the panelists see what we have now called inclusive human rights education. And perhaps in the process we might also question whether inclusion is the correct term for describing our practices, for perhaps we also strive to challenge the actual structures and the base, so to speak, rather than just open it at the margins for more inclusion. We actually, I think, want to challenge the basic norms that govern education, public education in Latvia today. So perhaps we start with Maria.
Right, well, as far as I understand, the idea is that we present at first our brief understanding of inclusive education, and specifically in relation to human rights education. I think there is a problem of definitions, of course, because inclusive education in most European countries is understood mostly in terms of inclusive either towards students of different social or educational backgrounds, so students whose parents maybe do not have education or have less education, or students who come from a poorer social background, or students with special needs, such as students with dyslexia. Inclusive education is less often framed in terms of inclusive attitude towards human diversity as such. And if you look at methodological materials and at conferences on inclusive education, you would very, very often come up across all sorts of practices and wonderful suggestions on how we include students who have different issues with, say, learning together with others at the same speed and with the same content. But usually this, with the same content or with the same curriculum, does not include the aspect of relating to the curriculum from the point of view of background of, say, having a gay or lesbian person in your family. Intercultural education, which should probably also come in here, and which in broader terms, of course, includes understanding people with different aspects of diversity and not necessarily people coming from other ethnic group or other country, in practice is still very often framed in terms of how do I communicate or how do I understand the culture of another country, but much less often directed towards understanding people of other background within your own society, and even less often including aspects which are not connected to ethnic cultural background, but other kinds of aspects which are constructed by culture. For example,
it's hard to talk about the LGBT situation in 3 minutes, especially about a country which has 40 million inhabitants, and it's estimated that there is 2 million gay and lesbian people. So you can imagine, like, it's as big as, I think, Latvia, yeah? In Latvia there's 2 million inhabitants. So if we all move to Latvia, it will be double. So some of the Poles would be very happy with that. Only 2 of them are now. Me and my colleague at this conference. So it's hard to say it in brief about the situation, but you probably have heard that we are Catholics, we are dominated by one religion, we are mainly Poles, we don't have big ethnic or national minorities, so there is perception that Poles are Catholics, are white, live in Poland forever, and of course are heterosexual. So it's not surprised that in countries like Poland, but also in Lithuania, which is also being regarded as Catholic, people think in great majority that homosexuality is unnatural. The Professor Kohn has said where he wasn't happy that the situation in Russia looks so bad, with 30-some people who say that homosexuality is unnatural. In Poland it's 89% if you want to compare it in this. So people think that we are really abnormal and sick and so on. Only 5% of the society says that it's natural, it's okay. So as my colleague said from Lithuania, probably only gay and lesbian think, maybe also maybe not all of them. But things change. Poland was one of the first countries in the region which had gay pride. It was Equality Parade in 2001, and we were surprisingly not banned. Nobody noticed it. There were 300 people. Year after year we had the Equality Parade, non-attacked, no stones, very peaceful demonstration. But until 2004, when the presidential campaign started and parliamentary campaign started, and the mayor of Warsaw, Lech Kaczyński, who recently died in a plane accident, he banned for the first time the gay pride in Warsaw in 2004, as I mentioned, and it provoked a huge debate in Poland, which I can see starting now in many other countries in the region, but the debate which also shifted up visibility of homosexual people. The topic began to be addressed in media. There were a lot of discussions, and in today's Poland, the topic is in every single newspaper, in every day, and I of course regret the banning of the gay prides twice already, and there were gay prides in Poznań, which in another city in Poland, which were beaten up by police, which were pacificated by police, but it shifted up the discussion, the debate on homophobia in Poland, and in today's Poland the discussion is really vital, and we discuss about many things. It doesn't transfer too much on legislation.
About the persecution of homosexuals during the Nazi regime, and even the following consequences of this persecution for the liberation of homosexuals in Germany. Between 1933 and 1945 there was an historical unparalleled persecution of homosexuals in our country, but the start of the state-controlled legal persecution was with the founding of the German Empire in 86.
I will be conducting the panel discussion in English because the three people who have joined me here at the table tried to learn Latvian last night and failed. So, I would like, as someone who does it himself, I would like to recognize the man and the woman in the back who are doing simultaneous translation. I know how terribly difficult it is, so thank you very much for the work that you're doing. The topic for our panel discussion is post-war Western Europe, from no rights to all rights. And when I was thinking about how to lead into this discussion, there was one thing that occurred to me that compares Western Europe to Eastern Europe. Britain had a parliamentary election a few months ago, and there is a gay magazine called Attitude. Every single one of the three people who were running for Prime Minister, Mr. Brown, Mr. Cameron, and Mr. Clegg, granted interviews to this magazine. By contrast, when we try to survey political parties and politicians in advance of elections here, we usually don't even get an answer, much less any detailed discussion of anything that we want to discuss. We could also, of course, look at Pride events, which are delightful and joyful and wonderful events in Western Europe, in cities very large and in cities also much smaller, as compared to the fact that here in Latvia we always have to have Pride behind a gate, behind a locked gate. 2 years ago we were on the street that runs along the river, just us. The 200 of us on this vast street which resembles an airport runway. And somewhere way, way, way off in the distance were the morons yelling at us. But there is very little joy in that. So with that, I would like to introduce the members of the panel, each of whom has been asked to prepare a little something to start, and then we will talk together. This is my phone not ringing, but still making a buzzing sound. Volker Beck is a member of the Bundestag in Germany. Ulrike Lunacek is a member of the European Parliament from Austria and co-president of the Intergroup on LGBT issues. And Nigel Warner is an LGBT rights activist from the United Kingdom. We were also to have John Fisher, who is the co-director of ARC International in Switzerland. He wrote 2 days ago to say that the United Nations is having a session on homophobia today in Geneva and absolutely had to be there, which begs the question of whether the United Nations always works like that. We're having a very important meeting tomorrow. So we're sorry that he could not be here. Ulrike, let's start with you, please.
Yeah, I need to get that from you. And it's on, I guess. Is it on? Can you hear me now? Well, then I'll try to speak. Oh, yes.
There you go.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here. A third time in Riga, a second time on LGBT issues. It was here in 2006 with the eggs and the tomatoes, etc. And then when we met in the hotel, just us as well. So and I was in Lithuania, in Vilnius, with quite a few of you a couple of weeks ago. And also there it was in a way where we were among us, but there were quite a few heterosexuals with us and quite a few ambassadors and things. So I think that was an improvement. And so I was very happy to come here because it's interesting also to look. It's interesting for all of us to look at our own history, where we come from, and what we have achieved and what not. As has been said, I'm Ulrike Lunacek. I'm now, since last July, a member of the European Parliament for the Green Group. I have been a national parliamentarian 10 years before in Austria for my party. I was the only one out as a lesbian in my parliament. There's still nobody else who says so, although I know there are some lesbians or gays. So I've had quite this fame of being the first one out. What I had prepared also with what we had agreed with Carlos and what he had asked us before is a bit look back to where I come from and when we're in my country, which is a very conservative one, very Catholic one, not a liberal one, where we have come from and where we stand now. And look at that, and then we can talk if you want also about other European issues, etc., which I do now at the European Parliament. When I went to school in the beginning of the 1970s, I had my high school graduation 35 years ago, so that's quite some time ago. At that time, I didn't know even the word lesbian. It didn't occur to me, although I remember that I was in love with my best friend. But more than holding hands after going out of the movies, it wasn't even on my mind that something more could be the case. I fell in love with some guys who never fell in love with me. So it was quite difficult times. And when we talked with some of my high school colleagues, at one of these graduation meetings 5 or 10 years ago, I asked them, did any of you ever talk about lesbians? Because there were all these very good, it was a girls' school, to say that as well. Yeah? Of course, there were all these very close friends, and one of them said, yes, I was so jealous of you and Jutta, this one friend of mine. Yeah? But at that time, at least I and my closest friends, we never talked about that, or we didn't have words for it either. There were no others that we could refer to. There were no movies where we could see lesbians, at least I didn't see them. There were, but I didn't see them. They weren't on TV, for example, and not in the movies where I would go to. So that, and only last year, we had in Austria the first documentary done on lesbians who, how they lived before, in 1971, the total ban on homosexuality was done away with legally. So that was only last year. Yeah? There's more things on gay men, but I'll focus on more on the history of the lesbians and how I see that. Although since the 90s we're doing a lot together between lesbians.
Addressed this important conference on human rights, homosexuality, as the chair of the management board of the Fundamental Rights Agency in Vienna. This is an agency that was established in 2007 based on a pre-existing institution that was the Monitoring Center for Racism and Xenophobia. And I'm also happy to report to you that one of the very first issues that the agency, as a broader mandate human rights agency, paid attention to was in fact the situation of LGBT people throughout the EU, producing first a comparative legal report, situation, legal framework throughout the EU, and later a sociological report. And these reports were produced at the request of the European Parliament, where you may well know there is a very strong support for bringing the questions forward and also to understand the situation in Europe. Fundamental Rights Agency has been and remains very active in the field of LGBT fundamental rights. Both these reports provide a thorough overview as well as an in-depth analysis on many issues. And the agency is very committed to its work on the fundamental rights of LGBT people, to continue raising awareness, engaging with policymakers and civil society organizations, and to collect the views of a wide range of stakeholders. The agency organizes roundtables across the EU. The first one took place precisely here in Riga in 2008, and I know that some of you actually attended this one as well. And this actually provided us with very important feedback. The link, of course, and feedback that feeds into further work of the agency is very important. Between 2009 and 2010, the agency participated in an expert group developing a draft Council of Europe Ministries recommendation on homophobia, which was finally adopted on the 31st of March this year. From 2009, the agency also cooperates closely with the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, in particular also in the Commissioner's initiative to follow up on the Fundamental Rights Agency's reports on the situation in the 27 countries by doing something similar in the 20 remaining Council of Europe member states.